Young adult fiction. It is a genre of books and I have read a lot of them. So here are a list of my few recently read favourites. I have done another books video, which are books that I read in 2016. That cicada's really loud. So I will link that below, have a look at that. Some of these are fairly similar, but I thought I would talk about some more because I have read a few beautiful ones recently. And if that cicada would shut up. First of all, I don't know, it was kind of the first young adult book that I read that was so quintessentially young adult that I fell in love with it. So Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. You will see a lot of Rainbow Rowell on this list because I think she is a beautiful writer. It's about a girl called Eleanor and a boy called Park, and Eleanor comes to Park's school. She's a transfer, you know, she's eccentric, she's entirely different to everyone around them. She has this frizzy red hair and she wears scarves all wrapped around her and like on her wrists and things, and her style is entirely different to the socialised norm. Naturally, Park really repels against that. Park's entire thing is that he wants to blend in. He wants to be invisible and do his own thing and not shake the boat because he just wants to get through and survive. And when he meets Eleanor, this kind of shakes Park's life up because at first they really dislike each other. You know, there was no other seat on the bus, so Eleanor sat next to Park, and he really didn't like that because that meant the attention from her was starting to go to him. And obviously, without spoiling anything, it is a love story and it is all about teenage insecurity and vulnerability, falling in love for the first time, falling in love despite social expectations and without fitting within the norm. Written really, really beautifully, and everything that Rainbow writes is gorgeous. So another book by Rainbow is Carry On. Carry On, if you have a Tumblr account, obviously, you know, you've probably heard of Carry On. Carry On is about Simon Snow, who is a wizard, and Tyrannus Basilton Grimpitch, who is also a wizard, and they go to a wizarding school. Simon has this roommate called Baz and Simon are in love, and it's about them in the midst of all this craziness going on in their world, finding solace in each other, and it's really gorgeous. And I think characters like Baz often get typecasted as the villain, and so it's really, really refreshing to see Baz and Simon in a happy relationship. So I think about 3 weeks ago now, I finished The Song of Achilles, which is by Madeline Miller. The Song of Achilles is the canon, true, in my soul, I firmly believe this, that Patroclus and Achilles were in love. Like, look back into mythology. So basically it's based on, you know, mythology around Achilles and Patroclus. And just, if you truly think about it, clearly they were in love. So it's kind of, you know, the real canon gay that was subtext in the Iliad. It is heartbreakingly and beautifully written from the point of view of Patroclus. So Patroclus is a young prince who gets disowned by his father, and so he goes to live with Achilles' father, and there's a whole ton of boys there because they're all training, because I think Peleus was trying to build a bit of an army out of all these teenage boys, and then that's when Patroclus meets Achilles, and from then on is where the story truly begins and ends. So it is really heartbreaking, but it is heartbreakingly beautiful, and your heart will cry. I cried a lot, but you know, you're ultimately better for it. And then we've got The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. I found out how to pronounce that because of a video of her pronouncing it. I talk about this in my books I read in 2016. It is a 4 series, so it's 4 books in the series, and it is about a group of boys from a private school, and so that's very preparatory, and they're all quite rich and very well off, with the exception of Adam. And so the 3 boys are Richard Campbell Gansey III, Adam Parrish, Ronan Lynch, and then we have Noah Cerny, who we have some kind of complications about, but you'll get into that in the book. And it is about Gansey's quest to find a Welsh king. So I wouldn't really call it a mystery, more of like a quest book, because it's more about the journey than it is about the destination. The way that Maggie writes about all of her characters is she always gives them a lot of different traits. You know, she's able to give her characters flaws and prove these out, and the main character is Blue Sergeant, who is this badass feminist who doesn't give a crap about what anybody thinks of her, and she lives in a house with psychics. So it's supernatural, and it is really, really excellent. I read all 4 books one after the other because I was so into it. I'd stayed up until 5 a.m. reading it because it really, really wraps you up, and you start to feel like you're on this quest for the Welsh king with them. I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I'll Give You the Sun is very, very pretty. It's written with this kind of poetic undertone, and it's very artsy. So it's about Noah Sweetwine and Jude Sweetwine, who are twins, and it flicks between their point of views and when they were certain ages. So something happens in their life, and their lives kind of get switched, and after this great tragedy, they're trying to find themselves again, and their personalities kind of trade places, and it's like reading their search to figure out themselves and how to deal with this tragedy. And throughout the whole thing, you're suddenly figuring out what the tragedy was and what happened, and then as Jude and Noah figure out things about themselves, you're figuring out things about them too, and it is just so interesting. There are a ton of beautiful, beautiful quotes from that. Just type in I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson on Tumblr and you will get a bunch of gorgeous, gorgeous quotes. And then we've got The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. The Perks of Being a Wallflower I talk about all the time, so if you don't know what that is, then you clearly haven't watched this channel, so I will link you to all of the times that I've talked about that. I just felt like I couldn't talk about young adult without talking about my favourite coming of age film and book. So, Looking for Alaska by John Green is a book that I read when I was about 14, 13. And I feel like a lot of John Green's books are kind of losing traction now that it's 2017. I know that they were incredibly big in, you know, that kind of 2012 to 2014, and so I felt like I couldn't talk about what I read in my younger teenage years without talking about John Green. John Green writes like he knows teenagers, which I mean, I'm sure he does because he has, you know, a teenaged audience, but he writes so intelligently and you really relate to all of the characters. Looking for Alaska is one of my particular favourites. And then I also love An Abundance of Catherines, and there's also Will Grayson, which is another great one. Just if you are within, you know, getting into your younger teen years and you want something to read, John Green is kind of the stepping stone into more deeper younger adult fiction. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo is another one of, you know, the kind of fantasy. It's a heist novel, and I have talked about that one in the other video, but again, I felt like I had to mention it. It is very, very interesting. It's quite dark and twisted. I think it's probably the darkest of all of these, so I do think it's more for older teenagers. Really interesting to think about character arcs within the two novels within Six of Crows. There's Six of Crows and then there's Crooked Kingdom. There's a lot of character arcs and development that go along with kind of coming of age, but it really isn't a coming of age novel. It's more about within a search for money and a search for what you perceive is going to bring you happiness. It's more, you know, the friends we made along the way. It's about finding solace in those around you and allowing yourself to be vulnerable towards them. Lost and Found by Brooke Davis. This is quite an interesting one. It's about a girl called Millie, and she's 7 years old, and she collects a book of dead things. So it sounds a bit weird, but embrace it. So Millie gets abandoned by her mother in a department store, and this kind of begins Millie's search for figuring out what's going on in her world, and it links Millie's story into the story of Agatha Panther. Agatha is a 82-year-old woman who has lived in her house. She's never left her house in a very long time, and so Millie and her story get intertwined with Agatha Panther's story, which then gets intertwined with Carl the Touch Typist story. And Carl is a 87-year-old man who just escaped his nursing home, and it is about how these three people who are so lost find each other and kind of find themselves to be the most cheesy person ever. As well, I am currently reading Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, so I'm sure this will be added to my list of favourites because it looks amazing. And on my reading list is also Aristotle and Dante, Discover the Secrets of the Universe. Yeah, I mean, if you have any young adult fiction that I haven't mentioned, feel free to tell me about it. This is obviously one of my favourite genres. I do love a good young adult fiction. I've been kind of trying to force myself to step out of that and read more challenging kind of novels, so I read The Secret History, which is kind of like the college kids version of it, which isn't really stepping out. And then I've been reading Brave New World. I want to read 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale and things like that, so hopefully we will see some more diversity within my reading list, because I need to get out there and force myself to read other books that aren't edgy teenagers. I will see you tomorrow.